The ranch sat at the far end of a long dirt road surrounded by dry grass, wooden fences, and wide open land. It had been there for decades, long before the nearby housing community appeared with clean sidewalks matching mailboxes and strict rules. The ranch never asked for attention and never needed permission to exist. Maria lived on that ranch with her husband Tom, and their days followed the slow, steady rhythm of land work. She woke early, fed the animals, checked fences, and handled problems as they came. She wore boots, jeans, and plain shirts and looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. Most people passing by would never guess anything more about her life. That morning a large delivery trailer broke down right near the ranch gate and blocked part of the narrow road. Maria parked her old pickup sideways near the entrance to keep the area safe until help arrived. She had already called for a tow truck and expected it within the hour. To her, it was a small problem and nothing unusual. Around mid-morning, a white SUV from the nearby neighborhood turned sharply onto the dirt road and stopped behind Maria's truck. Dust settled slowly as the driver door opened. A woman stepped out wearing sunglasses, clean shoes, and a tight expression. Her name was Linda, and she was known around the housing community for enforcing rules loudly and often. Linda looked at the blocked road, then at Maria with clear disapproval. She crossed her arms and spoke without greeting. She said the road could not be blocked and that HOA access was being denied. Her voice was sharp and carried across the open land. Maria stayed calm and explained that the road was private ranch land and not part of the housing rules. She said a trailer had broken down and a tow truck was already on the way. She spoke slowly and evenly with no anger in her tone. Linda shook her head and said she had reviewed maps and documents and insisted Maria was wrong. She pointed toward the housing community and said emergency access was required at all times. She did not ask questions and did not listen. Maria did not argue because she had learned that arguments wasted time and energy. She repeated that there was another access road and always had been. She said the block was temporary and safety was the reason. Linda stepped back and pulled out her phone. She announced she would call the police. She spoke as if it was a threat meant to end the conversation. Maria nodded once and said it was her choice. She leaned against her truck and waited. She checked the sky, the fence, and her watch. Tom was still in the barn repairing a stall and had no idea what was happening. The land stayed quiet except for Linda's voice as she spoke loudly into her phone. Linda paced back and forth, pointing toward the truck and the gate while explaining her complaint. She added extra details and repeated herself. A few nearby neighbors began to gather at a distance, watching quietly. Some whispered and some recorded with their phones. After several minutes, a patrol vehicle turned onto the dirt road, sending up another cloud of dust. Linda straightened immediately and ended her call. She placed her phone away and stood with confidence, ready to speak. The officer stepped out of the vehicle and looked around, taking in the ranch, the gate, the trailer, and the blocked road. He asked what was going on in a neutral tone. Linda spoke first and claimed that Maria was blocking HOA access and refusing to cooperate. She used strong words and spoke quickly as if time mattered. The officer turned to Maria and asked if it was true. Maria explained again that the road was private ranch land and that the block was temporary. She said the trailer had broken down and help was coming. Her voice stayed calm and respectful. The officer listened and looked around more closely. He studied the fence signs and the layout of the land. His expression showed uncertainty as he tried to piece together the situation. Linda watched closely with a tight smile, convinced the situation was turning in her favor. She folded her arms and waited for the officer to act. Then the officer looked at Maria again and paused. His expression changed slightly, as if recognition was forming. He looked at her face longer than before, as if searching his memory. Maria noticed the look but said nothing. She stood quietly waiting for the process to finish. The wind moved through the grass and the ranch stayed still. The neighbors waited. Linda held her breath. The officer cleared his throat and asked Maria a question that surprised everyone. He asked if she worked with the department. Maria gave a small nod and said yes, she did. Linda's smile faded just slightly, though she did not yet understand why. The officer's posture shifted and his tone became more careful. The moment hung in the air, and the quiet ranch seemed to hold its breath as the truth began to surface. The officer stood straighter after Maria answered, and the calm mood shifted across the dirt road. He asked her in a lower voice what role she had with the department, and she replied without pride or drama. She said she was the police chief of the county and had been for several years. The words landed softly but carried weight, and the officer nodded with clear respect. He apologized for not recognizing her right away and explained he had only seen her in uniform or at meetings. Maria told him it was fine and reminded him that today she was only handling a ranch issue. Linda froze where she stood, and her face lost color as the meaning of the moment reached her. She laughed once in a nervous way and said that could not be true. She said a police chief would not look like someone blocking roads on a ranch. Maria did not react to the comment and stayed quiet while the officer confirmed her position. He addressed Linda directly and explained that Maria was indeed the police chief and that the land in question was private property. Linda tried to speak, but her words tangled and she stopped herself. She glanced at the neighbors watching from a distance and then back at the officer. Her confident posture collapsed into stiff unease. The officer explained calmly that there was no violation taking place and that the temporary block was related to a broken trailer. He said emergency access was available through another route and that no action would be taken. Linda shook her head and insisted the HOA rules mattered more than personal claims. She said the community paid taxes and deserved clear access. Her voice rose again, though it lacked the earlier strength. Maria finally spoke again and her tone stayed even. She explained that HOA authority did not extend onto ranch land and never had. She said maps and documents had already been reviewed years earlier when the housing development was approved. She added that she had personally attended those meetings not as police chief but as a landowner protecting access and safety. She explained that the second road had been required by the county for that very reason. Linda looked confused and embarrassed and tried to recover by saying she was only concerned about safety. She said calling the police was her duty as a responsible resident. Maria nodded once and said safety was important and that was why the truck was placed there. She said she appreciated concern but not assumptions. The officer stepped between them slightly and said the matter was resolved. He advised Linda to contact the HOA board if she had further questions about boundaries. He said calling emergency services for non-issues created unnecessary strain. Linda crossed her arms again, but this time it looked more like a shield than a stance of power. She muttered that she had only followed rules. She avoided eye contact with the neighbors who were now whispering openly. Tom walked out of the barn at that moment, wiping his hands on a cloth. He saw the patrol vehicle and the group and walked toward Maria with a steady pace. He asked quietly if everything was okay. Maria said yes and explained briefly that there had been a misunderstanding. Tom nodded and placed a hand on the fence, leaning casually. He did not look angry, only tired. Linda looked at Tom and then back at Maria as if trying to measure them again. She seemed to realize she had misjudged more than just land ownership. The tow truck finally appeared in the distance, rumbling down the dirt road. Its arrival broke the tension and shifted attention away from the argument. The driver waved and began setting up to move the broken trailer. The officer watched for a moment and then told Maria he would file the call as resolved. He thanked her for handling the situation calmly and respectfully. Maria thanked him for responding professionally. As the officer returned to his vehicle, the neighbors began to drift away, slowly disappointed that the moment had ended. Phones lowered and conversations faded. The ranch returned to its quiet state. Linda lingered a few seconds longer as if wanting to say something else. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally she said she did not know Maria was police chief. Maria replied that most days that fact did not matter. She said respect should not depend on a title. Linda flushed again and nodded stiffly before walking back to her SUV. She drove away more slowly than she had arrived. The tow truck finished clearing the road and Maria moved her pickup back into place. The entrance opened fully again and the land breathed easier. Tom asked Maria if she wanted to talk about it later. She said there was nothing to talk about. She said people showed who they were when they thought no one important was watching. The sun climbed higher and the day returned to work and routine. But the moment lingered quietly in the air, a reminder that power often revealed itself in unexpected ways. The afternoon settled into the ranch with a slow, calm rhythm, and the earlier tension faded into the background. Maria returned to her usual tasks, walking the fence line, checking gates, and making sure the animals were settled. She moved with the ease of someone who knew the land deeply and trusted it. Tom worked nearby repairing tools and stacking supplies, but his mind stayed on the morning events. He had seen many people judge the ranch and its owners over the years, but today felt different. The presence of authority had changed everything, even though Maria had not changed at all. As the hours passed, the story traveled faster than the dust on the dirt road. By late afternoon, phones buzzed across the housing community with messages and short videos. Neighbors talked about the woman who had called the police and how wrong she had been. Some laughed while others stayed quiet, realizing how easily assumptions could turn into public moments. Linda sat inside her house staring at her phone, replaying the scene in her mind. She felt anger mixed with embarrassment and a sense of loss she could not name. She told herself she had followed rules and that rules mattered. Yet deep down she knew something else had been exposed. At the ranch, a different conversation unfolded when a county vehicle arrived near sunset. A deputy stepped out and greeted Maria respectfully. He said the department had received several calls asking about the incident. Maria sighed softly and told him everything had already been handled. The deputy nodded and said the situation had sparked discussion within the department. He said it reminded many officers why fairness mattered, especially when dealing with everyday citizens. Maria listened quietly, knowing those lessons were always being learned again and again. That evening Maria and Tom sat on the porch watching the sky change colors. The land stretched out before them, calm and honest. Tom asked if she ever got tired of being judged before being known. Maria thought for a moment before answering. She said she had learned not to carry other people's fear or pride. She said her job was to protect people, not impress them. She said the land taught patience better than any classroom ever could. The next morning the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Linda attended, sitting stiffly in a chair near the back. Other members discussed boundaries, access roads, and procedures with more care than before. The incident had made everyone cautious. One board member suggested inviting Maria to speak about land access and safety planning. The room went quiet and several people nodded. Linda stayed silent, feeling the weight of attention shift away from her control. When Maria received the invitation, she hesitated. She did not enjoy meetings like that, but understood their importance. She agreed to attend, not as police chief, but as a ranch owner and community neighbor. The meeting took place in a plain room with folding chairs and long tables. Maria arrived in simple clothes and greeted people politely. Some avoided her eyes while others offered apologies she accepted without comment. When it was her turn to speak, she explained the history of the land and the agreements made long before the housing development existed. She spoke about shared responsibility and mutual respect. Her words were clear, steady, and free of accusation. She explained that rules were tools, not weapons, and that safety worked best when people listened before reacting. The room stayed quiet as her message settled in. Linda watched from her seat, feeling small and exposed. She realized that power did not come from enforcement alone, but from understanding. She did not speak during the meeting, but listened more than she ever had before. After the meeting, several residents thanked Maria for her time. One said they never realized how much planning went into land access. Another said the incident had changed how they viewed authority and fairness. As Maria left the building, she felt tired but steady. She knew change came slowly, and often through discomfort. She also knew that moments like this mattered even when they felt heavy. Back at the ranch, the evening air carried familiar sounds and smells. Maria walked the land, once more feeling grounded. The road was clear, the fences stood firm, and the animals rested peacefully. The incident was no longer about one call or one mistake. It had become a quiet turning point where assumptions met truth and truth refused to shout. As night settled over the ranch, Maria stood looking out into the dark, knowing the final lesson was still unfolding, and that tomorrow would bring its own test of character and choice. Morning arrived quietly over the ranch, and the land looked the same, as it always had, calm, open, and honest. Maria stepped outside with a cup of coffee and breathed in the cool air, feeling grounded by familiar sounds. The events of the past days no longer felt heavy, but they were not forgotten. Tom joined her on the porch, and they watched the sun rise over the fence line. He asked if she felt any different now that everything had settled. Maria said she felt the same because she had not changed who she was to begin with. Later that morning, Maria drove into town to check on routine matters at the department. Officers greeted her with the same respect they always had. A few mentioned the ranch situation quietly and said it had started meaningful conversations. Maria listened and reminded them that respect should guide every interaction, no matter who stood in front of them. Across town, Linda went about her day more slowly than usual. She noticed how people spoke to her with less patience and more distance. No one confronted her directly, but the shift was clear. She felt exposed not by punishment, but by reflection. Linda replayed her actions again and again, realizing she had acted before listening. She had assumed authority without understanding boundaries. For the first time, she questioned why control had mattered so much to her. That afternoon, Linda drove past the ranch entrance again. The road was clear and quiet. She slowed her car and looked toward the land stretching wide and steady. She did not stop, but the sight stayed with her. At the ranch, Maria repaired a loose fence post and worked alongside Tom without speaking much. Their teamwork needed no words. The land responded to care as it always did. A week passed, and the housing community adjusted to clearer boundaries and calmer communication. The HOA posted updated maps and guidelines acknowledging the ranch access roads properly. Complaints dropped and conversations replaced confrontations. Maria noticed fewer curious cars slowing near the gate. The ranch returned fully to its quiet rhythm. She appreciated the silence more than any apology. One evening, a handwritten letter arrived at the ranch mailbox. Maria opened it slowly, recognizing the name at the bottom. Linda had written it. The letter was simple and careful. Linda apologized for her assumptions and for involving emergency services without understanding the situation. She admitted she had acted out of fear and habit rather than reason. She said the experience had forced her to look inward. Maria read the letter twice, then folded it neatly. She did not feel triumph or anger. She felt resolution. She placed the letter in a drawer and returned to her evening routine. Days turned into weeks, and the story faded from daily conversation. It became one of those moments people referenced quietly when discussing fairness or restraint. The ranch stood unchanged, serving as a reminder without needing to speak. One afternoon, Maria stood at the same gate where the issue had begun. The wind moved through the grass and the dirt road stretched open ahead. She thought about how easily power could be misused and how quietly it could be carried instead. Tom joined her and asked what she was thinking. Maria said she was thinking about how real authority was shown in patience and humility. She said the uniform mattered less than the choices made when no one expected anything. As the sun lowered, the ranch settled into peace once more. The land held no grudges and demanded no explanations. It simply existed, steady and true. The moment with the call, and the road had passed, but its lesson remained. Assumptions had been challenged, pride had been softened, and understanding had taken root quietly. Maria walked back toward the house, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges as it always did. She welcomed them not as tests of power, but as chances to act with fairness and calm. The ranch stayed silent behind her, strong and unchanged, a witness to truth revealed without force and respect earned without demand.